Yeah, and it's crazy that you mentioned that just because we just had the Rashad Bateman decision happen. We had Caleb Farley going on last week. So, of course, with that being breaking news now, I have to ask you about that, just the Rashad Bateman situation, just your thoughts on him as a prospect, and then this whole ordeal with guys that are projected to be first-round picks and them declaring early, essentially.
Yeah, and it's something where obviously you'd love to have that extra year of film because the more you see, the more you know, the more you can understand about the player. But I don't think this is a situation where it's going to hurt their draft stocks. The NFL, I think, is certainly going to be understanding of why certain players are deciding to do this, and it's going to be interesting to see the numbers. So far, we've had two notable ones with Farley and Bateman. Bateman, I've been doing my position previews on The Athletic, and my wide receiver preview came out a few weeks ago, and Bateman was my number 2 receiver behind only Jamar Chase of LSU. And with Bateman, I wrote in my piece how, you get vibes of Michael Thomas, you get vibes of Keenan Allen, guys who are not going to blaze, a 4.4 40-yard dash. They're more 4.5 guys, but the savvy that they play with, the route running, his ability to release, sell the pattern, maintain speed in and out of his cuts, just understanding how to leverage a defensive back. That's something you see on Bateman's tape. And so I think, he has size, 6'2", 210, not a burner, but I think he's fast enough. And so with Rashad Bateman, this is a chance to be a really good wide receiver class, maybe even better than last year. And last year was an historic class. So it's a really, really good group. And I think Bateman has a chance to be near the top of that list.
Right, and it's really interesting times just because with Bateman, you watched Tyler Johnson last year, and you're like, man, who's this other guy opposite of him, number 13? He really stood out to you. So I think he's a guy that really didn't need another year of film just because I think his film was so good last year, over 1,000 yards, and we know the accolades that he had last year. But I think this is a situation where Caleb Farley really was the first domino to fall, and Bateman was just the next guy in line. So could you see
Yeah.
some other guys potentially maybe opting out, or like, for example, a guy like, I know they have like different aspirations as far as national championship hopes, but Travis Etienne, I think he's another great example of a guy that potentially could come out, but we don't know what's going on in his corner, what people are telling him. And then his situation, I think, is a little bit different just because Clemson has a legitimate shot of winning the national championship. And then we know why he came back to get his degree and things of
Right.
that nature. So with ATN, do you think there's some other guys that potentially could follow in the footsteps of Farley and also Bateman?
Oh, no question. That I would be shocked if we don't hear a lot more names. It's going to happen, and it's understandable. What their motivations are with just the uncertainty of the season and wanting to stay healthy, and just they know they're going to declare for the 2021 draft anyways. So just get a head start, combine training, and I wish things were normal. I wish things were just like we had a regular college football season, because I'd love to see these guys back on the college football landscape, see them play this fall. It's the situation we're in, and so we're going to see a few more, and it's going to be interesting to see. So far we've had a couple of big name guys. Will we see even bigger names choose to do this as well? It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. No question.
Absolutely. But I want to flip the script a little bit. And of course, this is the Scouting the Scout series. So we're highlighting you, obviously. So I'm putting you on the hot seat here. But
Okay.
you've always been somebody I've definitely looked up to. I mean, growing up, you were one of the biggest names and still are the biggest name in the industry, in my opinion. But just your background story, I want you to shed a little bit of light on that. But I've always seen you as kind of like that diamond in the rough. You were that Division III prospect that came out of nowhere. And then I just want you to shed light on your story because I think it's really unique.
Well, I'm a D3 guy, so that
Yeah.
makes that works. Yeah, I realized my passion for the draft and scouting at a pretty young age. I grew up in Northeast Ohio, which is a football crazed area. So I always grew up around the game. And then when the Browns came back in 1999, they had the number 1 pick. That's when I really discovered my passion. I was only 12 years old, but I knew there was nothing else that I wanted to do with my life. And so it became, okay, you want to be a doctor, you go to medical school. You want to be a lawyer, you go to law school. If you want to be a scout, what do you do? And the best answer I came up with was just to put myself in as many situations to learn and grow and as evaluator. And that's the same attitude I've had since then. I attended Mount Union College, Division III football powerhouse, where I worked for the football team. Pierre Garcon and I were seniors, so we had scouts coming to campus each week, and I was their contact. So whatever they needed, I was right there with them. I'd go to practice with them. I'd pick their brains. I'd sit with them during the games. And I developed a lot of friendships that way. I learned a lot, and I still have a lot of those friendships today. So, I've been doing this for the last 15 years now, and I still have that same attitude. I'm just trying to learn every day. There's no direct path in this industry. It's all networking and learning, and really that's just how I feed my passion.
Absolutely. So the beast, of course, you have to reflect on that for me.
Yeah.
So just talk about where it came about. But another question I wanted to ask you about the beast is that I think something that is really so unique about your passion and your grind is that we both know there's thousands of prospects that come out every single year, but how are you able to maintain your efficiency with getting to what seems like every single prospect in the beast and then just being so accurate on a lot of those guys?
Well, the draft guide is something that, is trying to figure out how to make my own, forge my own path and make my way. I wanted to separate myself. And so the draft guide, which someone started calling it the beast, and it just kind of stuck, and, I'll roll with it. So, the beast has been something that I'm very proud of, and I continue as long as people enjoy it, I'm going to keep doing it. And my first one I ever did was my freshman year in college in my dorm room. That was the 2005 NFL drafts, Aaron Rodgers and Alex Smith and all those guys. And so, it's something that's grown every year. It's something that I've really, and this year's going to be really interesting because I've got a system down where I, know to watch X amount of prospects by the time the season starts. And then I need to have X amount of reports done by Christmas. And, then this year, everything's so different. So it's really going to challenge me, which is good. Change is good because it challenges you. And so it's going to be interesting to see how things work this year for everybody. But it's something where I take a lot of pride in understanding who all these players are. And that's really one of the biggest challenges of doing this job when I'm not a scouting department, I'm one person. And so I have to understand, if I watch 2 tapes on a player, I need to know, okay, is it worth me going to a 3rd tape, or do I need to move on to the next player? Because there's always another player that you can watch and understand. And, because you have 32 different teams looking at all these different players. And so there's just a lot of guys to get to. You have to eliminate players that you just don't think are next level caliber players. And so it's definitely a challenge, but one that I'm very blessed to call a career.
Absolutely. And I know some of the things that you're talking about just because I've done a publication the past 2 years now, and I've gotten to, I think, 300 prospects last year, and that really was a challenge for me. So I know exactly some of the things that you're going through. But you've been in the game for 15 years now, and I'm sure it seems like much longer than that. But you've gotten a chance to really learn yourself as an evaluator. So what would you say are your core beliefs or your biggest beliefs as an evaluator?
Well, football, it's a complicated game. So naturally, I think scouting football can be complicated as well, but I don't think it has to be that way, and that's something where it could be a lot, but I think we tend to overcomplicate things. And I'm not trying to oversimplify this, but I do think we try to make things a little more complicated than they need to be. I think scouting can be boiled down to this one simple objective: identify translatable traits. So that's 3 words. And I think that's what we need to focus on above all else. Can you identify the traits that translate? And so we can get bogged down by the metrics, by the stats, by the hype, all these different things. But if you focus on what a player does well and whether or not that translates to the pro game, that's where you start. And that's going to take you down the right road.
And I'm really glad you said that, just because I think some people, they don't really understand like exactly what they're looking at. And I'm sure you get a ton of DMs asking like, man, what are you looking at to see this, or this in a prospect? So I'm really glad that you said that, and that makes a lot of sense. But I'm going to transition to our next phase and just talk about your biggest prospect hit or miss. And I think this is another area where you're really unique in that you have a terrific eye of talent. And we've talked back and forth about Jedrick Wills when you made him your early offensive tackle 1 last year. And that's something that you were very prideful and pounding your chest about. So that was really good to see. But I think you're very gifted in that you can identify talent essentially before a lot of people get to them. So just talk about that as far as being able to identify talent, and then maybe go in depth about your biggest prospect hit, and then somebody else that taught you a lesson that you missed on.
Well, yeah, no, and it's funny. It's a fine line between, um, you know, trying, like you said, pound your chest, but at the same time, you don't want to, come off as you're, bragging, or, it's just it's a weird thing, because I do take a lot of pride in the fact that I didn't see anybody talk about Jedrick Wills as, one of the top offensive tackles until I put him at OT1. I thought he was a top 5 pick. One of the top 5 players last year. So it's just a weird thing. I mean, I'm not a self-promoter by nature. That's just not who I am. But sometimes I am very proud of a player that maybe I identified as a guy that's a big-time player. And I mean, when I think about, I've had plenty of misses, and that's why I'm not someone that likes to pound his chest, because I've had plenty of times where I've missed on guys. I think one of my best hits going back, I loved Antonio Brown out of Central Michigan. He was so sudden, so electric. I mean, he just ran circles around MAC defenders. He did whatever he wanted, and it was just unfair. And so the combine did not go well for him. He's in like the mid 4.5s. His other testing numbers weren't great, but the tape was just awesome. And obviously, we know he's a little different. Personality wise, but it made no sense to me why he fell to the 6th round. And obviously he went on to have a great, 10-year run there, longer than 10 years before things kind of went off the rails a little bit. Biggest miss, I've certainly had plenty of them, we all do. And that's, I think goes back to one of my beliefs. And that's, as a scout, don't worry about going undefeated, because you're going to make mistakes. In scouting, it's not about going undefeated. It's about building a strong batting average with your evaluation. So mistakes, they're an essential part of learning and growing as a person. And I think that's true in both life and scouting. But for me, one of my biggest misses, no doubt, has to be Pat Mahomes. And I think he's a great example of just how tough it is to evaluate the quarterback position. So much of it is mental, the mental side of things. And you can watch his Texas Tech tape. He's basically playing backyard football in a conference not known for defense, in a pass-happy offensive system. So you're left with all these questions. Can he read defenses? Can he adjust to NFL coverages? There's so much from a mental aspect I just don't think we knew about him. And there was a ton of about him as a prospect, obviously, the way he can improvise, his arm, his movement skills. But there were also so many questions, and he has obviously outplayed everyone's expectations. But definitely I'd like to have a mulligan on projecting Pat Mahomes.
Yeah, so I want to piggyback off that a little bit. So with Mahomes, what is something that he taught you to use further, and now what you're using in your quarterback evaluations?
I don't know. I think the biggest thing is to understand how those of us on the outside, not with an NFL team, how we're just at a disadvantage. Because when you evaluate the quarterback position, you're asked to do so many things. A college offensive system is not there to groom a quarterback for what the NFL is asking you to do. An offensive system at the college level is just the number one priority is score points to win games. It's not a coach's responsibility to say, okay, we're going to put you in the system, so when you go to the NFL, it'll be a seamless transition. That's not what their job is. So understanding that what they're asked to do in college is going to be different than what they're going to do asked to do in the NFL. And those of us on the outside, we're just at a disadvantage because we don't, like at NFL teams at the combine, they can sit down with these guys in a hotel room or in a meeting room and go over tape and say, okay, what are you looking at here? What are your progression reads? Did you this blitz? How are you identifying this? Or, the defense with what they're trying to do to you. Just the whole mental part of the game. I know you know this well. The mental part of the game is so important and something that we don't always see on their college film. So, it's something that for those of us on the outside, we have to try and infiltrate in our own way, whether that's talking to the player during a combine interview or talking to NFL contacts and saying, how did he do on the whiteboard? How did he do during his film session? Trying to get a better sense that way, because unfortunately we just don't have regular access to these prospects like, say, NFL teams do.
Right. And 2017 was actually my first year seriously scouting, and that group taught me so much, the quarterback group. And I was one of the ones that was a Deshaun Kaiser guy, just because I
Yeah,
thought he
me
could
too.
just I thought he just could overcome his accuracy issues. But the one thing that group taught me was how important fit was for quarterbacks, just because Kaiser couldn't have went to a worse fit with the Browns at the time with Hugh Jackson, and then Deshaun Watson, he goes to the Texans, and as much bullcrap as Bill O'Brien gets for being an evaluator as a GM, I think he's a really good talent evaluator as far as developing quarterbacks. And then
Yeah.
with Pat Mahomes, we know, I mean, after his rookie year, he was just phenomenal. So I think that's something that the 2017 group really taught me. So I'm really glad that you mentioned Patrick Mahomes, just because that group was really phenomenal.
Oh, and I was having a conversation the other day with Gil Brandt, who I've known Gil for a lot of years, and he's been someone that I've leaned on, and he's been a mentor for me in this business. And we were talking about Pat Mahomes, and we were running through where different people had him ranked, both on the media side and on the NFL side. I mean, everybody was all over the map on Mahomes. So I don't feel too bad about being off on him like I was. I mean, I thought he was a late one, early two, extremely promising. But I think you make a good point about fit. What happens if, Deshaun Kaiser ends up with the Chiefs, with Andy Reid, and, a guy like Mahomes goes to a train wreck that was Hugh Jackson and the Browns. I mean, just how do things work out? And it is a fascinating thing to look at, and how important fit is with these players. Because honestly, it's tough for us, because you and I, we could nail a prospect in terms of their strengths, what they do well, and rank them high. But if they go to a situation in the NFL, if they're drafted by a team where it's just not a good fit, we look like we're wrong about the player because it didn't work out. But in reality, we identified the strengths and everything, exactly what he was. He just didn't go to a right fit that could accentuate what he does really well.
Right. And, quarterback play, I could go on and on about that, just because that position is home for me. But I want to transition to our next segment. And you've seen the NFL draft grow so much, even when you started back 15 years ago. And now social media has just changed so many things. And what you're seeing is that these younger scouts, and even scouts that are in the business, they have social media as well. So I just want you to give them a piece of advice or a word of advice of something that you learned during your upbringing as a scout.
Well, it's just nothing happens overnight. Scouting is a tough career path, because there's only so many full-time jobs on the media side. It's very, very tough to break in with an NFL club. But if it's your passion, go for it. You're going to work your tail off every day. You can't live on what you did yesterday. You have to prove yourself every day. That's an old Tony Gwynn quote that I think transcends baseball, and it's true for almost every walk of life. But study, write, talk, listen, just work on getting better every day. And, I've been lucky that I've had a lot of people helping me along the way. I've had a lot of mentors in this business, a lot of friendships, a lot of networking, and I couldn't do what I do without those. And so the biggest thing you could do for a scout is the network and get to know people, and develop your Rolodex of people that, it might just be for a word of advice, but sooner or later, next thing you know, you might be friends with them and, have a connection. So I've got a lot of cool scouting memories just from just all those connections and all those things that have happened. So try your best. And it's not easy. But I can remember 15 years ago when I was paying my way to go to the Senior Bowl, paying my way to go to the Shrine Game. And that's where, you meet a lot of these people. That's where you create those networking opportunities. I've had plenty of interviews with NFL teams. Some jobs I didn't get, which I was totally bummed about. Some jobs I was offered and just wasn't the right fit. So it's a weird business that changes all the time. And just if it's your passion, then absolutely go for it.
Absolutely. That's really encouraging words of advice. And I just want to talk about my experience at the Senior Bowl last year. So it was my second year last year at the Senior Bowl. And, your first year there, we had no idea what was going on. And then my first year there, I had no idea in 2018. So the first year there, I'm the guy that just wants to sit in the stands and just try to watch every position. Receivers are over here, DBs are over here. And last year, I go up in the press box for the first time. I see you up there with your laptop and binoculars. I'm like, man, I should have just been doing this the whole time. So it's just funny the lessons that you learn when you go to these events. And then the combine, that was my first year there as well. And I was like a kid in the candy store going there. So it's really cool to see all these experiences and then just rub elbows with a lot of notable names in the business. But Dane, I think the world of you, man. I think you're by far the best in the business. You're somebody that I try to be every single day. If I grow up to be half as good as you, man, I'll be happy. So
no, hey, you're doing a great job making a name for yourself, and it's social media has been a powerful thing, and I think cream rises to the top, and we've seen you have a nice little ascension here, and so that's been awesome to see, and it's been cool to track that, and so it's one of those things. It's I think you're a success story because if you love this enough, you're gonna make it. You're gonna find a way, and I think you're definitely proof of that.
I definitely appreciate it, man. And thank you for joining the Reid Option Pod. I know you probably got some prospects here to do soon because I know you're knee deep in your previews right now. So I appreciate you joining. Thanks so much, Dane.
Anytime. Thanks, Jordan.